I'm going to be reviewing Stranger Things, the Netflix show. I actually just finished it about 2 days ago, and I'm just now getting to it. But um, I was over at a friend's house, and we were watching The Guest. And the soundtrack to The Guest is a very synthwave, very 80s sound. So I heard some tales of Stranger Things having the sort of same soundtrack. So I said, you know what? Everyone's jumping onto this bandwagon. Let's do the same thing. So I did. We watched one episode, and I told them to shut it off. Not because of how bad it was, but because it was so good that I wanted to be able to actually pay attention to the entire episode without any distractions. If there's more than two people in a room, I can't focus on a thing. So this was so good, I wanted to keep watching it. Now, the other thing about this is it's supposed to be around, I guess it is around the 80s. And I've seen a lot of shows, a lot of horror films, a lot of, dramas that try to capture the 80s. Most dramas do it way better than a horror film does. But the nostalgia, I'm not from the 80s, but I love 80s horror films. The way this is put together, there are times when I'm watching it and I forget that it's a show from this time, from this era. It's amazing how well they've captured that sense of the 80s. If more modern film could do this without still somehow going back to this time, even though you watch a movie, an old horror film that's supposed to be based out of the 80s, you just know it's not going to work out. I mean, I've watched what was the last one I watched that was supposed to be based out of the 80s? The Conjuring, I guess. Maybe that was the early 70s. The way the horror was, it was almost a little goofy, you know. This has that feel to it. The soundtrack goes with it. The atmosphere, the darkness of it all. It captures it so well. Now the characters, you've got a slew of characters come into play, and one of the best known actresses in here, one of the best known people in this show would probably be Winona Ryder. And her performance, I'm not going to spoil anything in case you haven't seen it. A lot of her performance requires her to be just mentally devastated. She is crying through about, oh gosh, maybe 5 or 6 episodes of the show. She's got a tear in her eye, and she's bawling, and her son's going missing, which is understandable, but she plays the part very well. I'd say that was actually very emotionally draining for her to do. It wasn't Edward Scissorhands. She was crying. God, my hair is all messed up. Oh well. But yeah, the characters there's Will. He's the one who goes missing. You've got I'm actually gonna have to check that out. There's so many different characters in here that I'm gonna try to remember the names of them so I don't tell you guys wrong. Yeah, we've got Jim Hopper, Mike Wheeler, and obviously you'll find out about this girl named 11. 11 is have you ever seen Carrie? Yeah, imagine Carrie without pyrokinesis, but it is a kinetic power. This is for the people who haven't seen it, but if you have seen it, you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, about the characters, it's almost, I've heard references to the Goonies, the way these boys are, the way they get together. I personally thought it was like Stand By Me. Stand By Me meets Let's see. Poltergeist. A little bit of The Entity with Winona Ryder, the way she acts, it was almost like Barbara Hershey in The Entity. Some Lovecraft is in there, and it's a mixture of everything. It's amazing how much they could fit into this show, and it be so good. It's not R-rated. It's TV-14 was the rating for it, but that's all right. You don't if it's a really good show, you don't need to have a bunch of blood and gore and cussing to make it a good show. Then we're going to get into the sheriff, Jim Hopper. He's played by David Harbour. And if you know who David Harbour is, you know he's been in about 48 movies this past 2 years. He's been in everything. Black Mass, A Walk Among Tombstones. Okay, maybe not 48, but he's been in a few that I can't name off right now. But he's amazing in this. The way his character is portrayed, and the reason he's got a darkness to him. I mean, it's almost as dark as the show. His life is what makes this show even just as dark. But he's got a reason for that. That's another big. It's not really a huge spoiler. You find out kind of early, but it's an understandable depression that he's going through. His character reminds me a little bit of Max Payne. He's the sheriff, and he's an alcoholic, and there's a scene in the show where it looks like he's got more pills than a pharmacy laid out on his table, so he's dabbling in something. But yeah, he plays such an amazing sheriff in this. You can tell the way his character is. He's had a past, a bad past, and before all that past, you can also you hear snippets of his previous job. Apparently, he was a cop in the city, and this is more the countryside. So it's he explains that the worst thing that happens was an owl hitting a woman in the head because an owl flew down and hit her in the head because she thought her hair was a bird's nest. I mean, you can tell there's the city and the country. There's not a lot of violence going on, but then shit goes crazy, so to speak. And in this, I've seen him in a lot of shows, and he really stood out in this one. Now, this is something I was really excited to talk about. Was the soundtrack. It's by a synthwave group. I guess they're synthwave more. I don't know. They sound synthwave to me. They're called Survive, and it's I was talking about The Guest earlier, which is a phenomenal movie if you've not seen it. But it reminds me. It has the same soundtrack as The Guest, almost, like genre-wise. Survive actually did a few songs for The Guest. But the soundtrack to this is incredible. The soundtrack to this reminds me a lot of I don't know how to put it. It's got a John Carpenter feel mixed with Laserhawk. And if you've never heard Laserhawk, gosh, man, what is up with this? If you've never heard Laserhawk, check out Laserhawk. I'm sure most of you have heard of John Carpenter, but it's just, I've not been. I mean, it fits that show like a glove. It's amazing what those. It was two of the members from the band from the group survived, and they got together and made the soundtrack for it, and it's coming out soon on CD, on a physical release. So I suggest picking that up if you're into electronic music. It'll change your life. I really think if you're into sci-fi, if you're into horror, if you're into drama, comedy, thrillers, buddy comedies like that from the 80s, uh, especially movies like Stand By Me and The Goonies, and you're really gonna enjoy this show. I mean, when I first started watching it, I had a feeling it was gonna be terrible because it was on Netflix. Uh, I can't stand most Netflix shows. They're all kind of the same. It's like watching an AMC show. Uh, The Walking Dead. Every episode is the same. It feels like to me the way the directors are. It's like they direct in the same fashion every single episode. And this was from the Duffer Brothers, which they've also made like one other project called Hidden, and it was about a monster. I've not seen it, but I now that watching Stranger Things, I may have to. But as I said, I thought this was going to be terrible, and it actually turned out to be one of the best shows I've seen in a very long time. And it's not even rated R, which if it's not rated R nowadays, it's probably garbage if it's a horror film or show. I do suggest checking this out. So, yeah, I hope you like it.